it in your head a little bit more? No?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Well, tonight, as we kind of move along, here's our schedule. Tonight, we're going to talk about sort of the genealogies and the beginnings of the Gospels. Um, and in some ways, you think about a good book. There's always the prologue, and so in some ways, this can serve as the prologue. And so I have a question. So, who are you and how do you know? So I asked the question, who are you? How are you going to answer that?
I'm Joseph, Jesus' earthly father.
Uh,
Ah,
And how do you know that? Because there's a script that tells you, huh?
Yes, and I have Mary, who everyone met back in Elizabeth's house.
Mm,
And John was born 6 months before Jesus.
okay. So who are you?
well, I think that's contextual a little bit because I was like in an online class and some there and if it's an online class that's about Bible study stuff or church stuff, I'll introduce myself in that context. But if it's in an astronomy meeting or something like that, I introduce myself with my school credentials. So
Okay.
I don't know. So I think that question is a little bit loaded. Like if a person's asking that question.
I think people would normally answer that for who they think they are themselves and what image they want to project. But I think the real way to answer it would be putting yourself in the other person's shoes and what do they see you as?
Okay.
I think a lot of us, I my first thing is I'm a mom, I'm a grandmother, and that's how I identify really, I guess. But there are people that say, well, who are you? Yes, you have kids, you have grandkids, but who are you? And I really don't know if I really don't know if I can answer that. But
Okay.
I like Mark's what other people say.
For me, nobody's ever asked me that, so I never thought about it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
But Chris, haven't you been asked to introduce yourself to people?
not really.
Hmm.
No.
And then it depends on where you put the emphasis. Do you say, who are you? Or who are you? Or who are you?
Or what are you?
And like, didn't you, who said it earlier? It's based on the context
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
question.
Hmm.
Like you said, Debbie, you've got your school part and then your church part. So yeah, that's a loaded question, Jess.
Yeah, to people, if you're in a conversation and you meet new people and they say like, tell me a little bit about you. What are the things you're going to tell? Depends on probably where you're meeting the person.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll move on from the loaded question then, huh? Okay. So, people spend lots and lots of money to know who they are.
Oh, I know, it's ridiculous.
Um, some people spend, it
True.
becomes a hobby. Tracing, and trying to answer that question, who you are.
Hmm.
By doing, family trees, going back and that kind of thing. I mean, some people have, done genealogies, family trees. Some people have done DNA tests. Some people have employed an expert help through genealogists and things like that, because in some ways, answering the question of who we are can be pretty important.
I'm guilty
Don't
of
you
some
think
of that. I've done Ancestry. I've had the DNA where, what is your makeup of your ancestry and stuff like that. I
Uh-huh.
find it interesting to find out where my family came from. And
Have you done the you where I'm Scottish and Irish and
yeah, I'm pretty much
Italian?
Scottish, mostly English,
Mhm.
which I can trace my father's side of the family back to coming over to this country in 16 something. So, yeah, that was kind of a no-brainer.
Well, as we started out last week, and I asked the question, why are there four gospels? And what was the takeaway answer to that?
They were all written for different people.
Okay, they were written for different groups, so
Groups, yeah.
different contexts, maybe
Different audience. Yeah.
different audience. Okay, and so the gospel writers, are asking that question, not of themselves, but of Jesus. Who is this Jesus? And so one of the ways that in the Bible in particular, not just the Gospels, the scripture writers utilize genealogies. So first of all, what is a genealogy?
Isn't it going back to see how far back your ancestors are and
Right. So
it
it's tracing your ancestors. Like, okay, I am the son of Jesse and Dorothy Cole. My dad is the son of Millard, and I don't know what my grandmother's first name was. Um, and so on and so forth. And you go back and back and back and back. So if we think about that genealogies are important. We see them kind of all the time, especially in the Old Testament. Why are genealogies important? Why are they there?
for now or for back
No,
then?
so back then, so if we think about them biblically, why are they important?
To trace back to Abraham to show that, well, for certain gospel writers, it would be really important to say that Jesus was of Abraham's line and David's line and all of that stuff.
Okay, so we're going to get there to the gospel writers. So they have some vested interest in genealogies and how far they choose to trace something back. Okay. Any other reasons we could think about for having genealogies?
Was it status too back then?
Okay, maybe it could be status.
Inheritance.
Say that again, Sue.
Inheritance.
Inheritance. So yeah, okay, good. All right, so if we think about the genealogies in the gospel, so we talked a little bit already about establishing a particular lineage or heritage. I mean, we see that becomes really important if you think about the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay. One of the things, if you're going to be a priest or work in the temple, well, you need to have an established lineage back to the tribe of Levi.
Levi.
Okay. And so establishing lineage and heritage can be important, especially if you're thinking about the the, the the heroes of the faith. I mean, what would it be like if you were able to trace your family heritage back to, say, maybe George Washington?
Mm.
That kind of what does that do for you as a as answering that question of who you are?
Well, it is God does this all the time. It is so ironic you're talking about this because last Tuesday, in the middle of a low moment in my class at St. Joe's, I got a notification that like there was some dig in the south of England archaeologically, and they did genealogical testing, and I have one of these 23andMe things. Anyway, um, I shared DNA with somebody that was excavated from this
Gee.
place, right? But the thing that fascinated me about it, and that's been like on my mind all week, is that this person lived sometime between 100 BC and 100 AD. And it just made me think about like this woman who is alive at the time Jesus is doing his work, and she's in the south of England, and like that's just so interesting to me. Like thinking that's the first person that I know that I can trace back to like that was alive at that time, particularly. So it's just been on my mind. I don't know.
That's pretty cool.
That's interesting stuff.
Yeah, she was buried with a pot over her head. That's a whole other thing. She had a head injury, so like they covered her head with a pot. I don't know. It's
There
weird.
you go.
But, yeah.
All right. So, yeah. So in some ways it establishes lineage, helps us to kind of, in some ways answer that question of who we are. Genealogies in the biblical sense, will help to demonstrate the fulfillment of prophecy. All right. So, think about, Abraham for a minute. What did God promise Abraham? Promised that he was going to make him, great, make his, give him land and give him descendants. And you can use a genealogy to kind of go through that. We talked about identifying tribal and family lines. They can be used to preserve historical records. But one of the things, and I think this is again along the lines of Abraham, if we kind of use his genealogy, it helps to remind us and emphasize God's faithfulness. I mean, think about the story of Abraham. Did it ever seem, if you didn't know the end of the story and you just were going along with Abraham, would you ever have thought that God was going to be faithful in his promises? Because it took hundreds of years in order for that to come to fruition. And then, a lot of times using genealogies, we learn lessons about people. So we'll see people included in a genealogy that have, some kind of unique story that will help us with moral lessons. So biblically speaking, genealogies are important. We see them a lot in the Old Testament. So when we look at them and we read them, typically we just kind of want to fumble through and get through them as quickly as we can. Because for most of us, it's what? Just a bunch of names that we don't know. Okay. But, again, you have to think about and take pause and say, okay, why is this here? Because, it's more than just a list of names. It has a theological purpose, has a historical purpose, cultural purpose. And, you think about the Bible. What is the Bible about? It's God's redemptive plan. And so it really shows how God is involved in that redemptive plan. And so tonight, our goal is really to understand how each gospel tries to begin to answer that question. who is Jesus. Okay. And they do that, in the introduction of their gospel. And each one chooses an introduction for Jesus in a different way. Okay. And so we have four introductions. So what we're going to do is just going to look at each one individually. And then we're going to take a couple minutes, reflect on that, and then kind of move on. And so this is the introduction in the Gospel of Matthew, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez, and Zerah by Tamar, and Perez by the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Ram, and Ram the father of Amminadab, and Amminadab the father of Nahshon, and Nahshon the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. And David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah, and Solomon the father of Rehoboam, and Rehoboam the father of Abijah, and Abijah the father of Asaph, and Asaph the father of Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat the father of Joram, and Joram the father of Uzziah, and Uzziah the father of Jotham, and Jotham the father of Ahaz, and Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, and Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, and Manasseh the father of Amos, and Amos the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jehoiachin, and his brothers at the time of deportation to Babylon. And after the deportation to Babylon, Jehoiachin was the father of Shealtiel, and Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel, and Zerubbabel the father of Abiud, and Abiud the father of Eliakim, and Eliakim the father of Azor, and Azor the father of Zadok, and Zadok the father of Achim, Achim the father of Eliud, Eliud the father of Eleazar, and Eleazar the father of Mathan, Mathan the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, to whom Jesus was born, who is called Christ. So all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations.
Wow.
And from David to the deportation of Babylon, 14 generations, and from deportation to Babylon to the Christ, 14 generations.
Wow.
Okay. So that's how Matthew chooses to introduce his gospel. Now let's look at Luke. Jesus, when he began his ministry, was about 30 years of age, being the son, as was supposed, of Joseph, the son of Heliel, the son of Matthew, the son of Levi, the son of Melchi, the son of Janiah, the son of Joseph, the son of Matthias, the son of Amos, the son of Nahum, the son of Ilsi, the son of Nagai, the son of Matha, the son of Matthias, the son of Simeon, the son of Joshesh, the son of Joda, the son of Joanne, the son of Risha, the son of Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, the son of Neri, the son of Melchi, the son of Adi, the son of Kosam, the son of Eladam, the son of the son of Joshua, the son of Eleazar, the son of Joram, the son of Mathat, the son of Levi, the son of Simeon, the son of Judah, the son of Joseph, the son of Jonam, the son of Eliakim, the son of Meliah, the son of Mina, the son of Mathatha, the son of Nathan, the son of David, the son of Jesse, the son of Obed, the son of Boaz, the son of Salah, the son of Nahshon, the son of Abinadab, the son of Adam, the son of Arni, the son of Hezron, the son of Perez, the son of Judah, the son of Jacob, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham, the son of Terah, the son of Nahor, the son of Serug, the son of Rehu, the son of Peleg, the son of Eber, the son of Shelah, the son of Canaan, the son of Araphax, the son of Shem, the son of Noah, the son of Lamech, the son of Methuselah, the son of Enoch, the son of Jared, the son of Mahalalel, the son of Canaan, the son of Enos, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. Okay, so that's how Luke chooses to open his gospel.
Amen.
And then we have John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Okay? He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him, nothing was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and life was the light of men. The light shines in darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, "This was he whom I said, he whom comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the only God, who is at the Father's side. He has made him known." All right, so that's how John chooses to open his gospel. And then we have Mark. Get ready for it. In the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Okay, so as you kind of think about these portraits, what did you notice about each of the gospels' introduction to Jesus?
How did they know? I mean, how did they know all these names and so far back? And didn't they have different? Would you start with Mark? They mentioned different people, didn't they? Or some of them were different, or did they all just sound the same? I mean, God bless you for able to read all those names.
I think they went in different directions. Like one
Yeah.
started with the beginning and one started with Jesus working backwards. So we kind of missed some names in there. And then the other two just skipped all that and went right to God.
But it makes sense if, like, given what we talked about last week, because if Matthew's point was, to point out that Jesus is fulfilling Jewish prophecy, then you start with Abraham and you go down. Whereas if you have Luke, you start with Jesus is for everybody and go back to Adam, who is connected to God. And then John is going on about divinity and that, Jesus is divinity. And then Mark is just like bare bones, like nothing. But it's interesting because didn't we say last week that they used Mark as a source? So there's nothing there.
Well, if you remember when we talked about the source theory, there were certain things that both Matthew and Luke took from Mark, but then remember there were certain things that were common to those gospels that are outside of Mark. So there are other sources as well. So, not everything in the gospel. So, these prologues certainly didn't come from from Mark's material. Other things that you noticed about each gospel's introduction of Jesus.
Other than the fact that, these were all written by different people, four different people. Maybe they needed to show this lineage,
Lineage.
whatever, to those people to get them to understand where Jesus came from. Where Mark, was that the last one? No, Matthew, Mark, Luke. Just sort of here, just start from the beginning. He probably, the other people seem to think that they needed to know all this information first, where he came from. I don't know.
So are you saying that for certain groups of people that was important information, and for others it's not?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Maybe not as important that it needed to be all written down and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And if we remember that each of the Gospels were written 20 to 30 years after the one before it, then that's another whole generation, basically. And they can relate to their parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, perhaps. And so they were making it more personable. Or not.
Any other thoughts? So very we have Matthew and Luke that are similar in the sense that they share genealogies.
Mm-hmm.
We have Mark, who really has no genealogy and really no big, huge introduction. I mean, if you look at his thing, it's like the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So what's Mark's introduction? Here's Jesus. He's the Son of God.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have John, which is a gospel it's a bit different, and chooses to introduce Jesus in kind of a genealogy, but a genealogy that's very different. And so if we think about that and just kind of go one by one, as you already mentioned, Matthew, so his audience would be primarily Jewish. So it's important if you're answering the question, who is Jesus? You want to answer that question and connect them back to Abraham. And did you kind of notice, if we kind of go back to Matthew for a minute, what's the first thing that Matthew says? Jesus Christ, what?
The son of David.
The son of Abraham. Okay, so he kind of puts that out there and then kind of traces it back through his genealogy. And so if we're kind of thinking about this, Matthew has that Jewish lineage. So heavy emphasis on the Old Testament, fulfilling prophecy, and kind of using that Old Testament to kind of prove that Jesus is the Messiah. And so why is that significant for Matthew? Why does he need to do that Abraham and David piece?
Because that's where Jesus was supposed to come from.
Okay.
To be proven.
Yep. So if we think about the the Old Testament, where did Jesus come from? What's his lineage?
He was always to come from David.
Right. The tribe of Judah, and Judah comes from David. So that becomes an important point. If we look at Luke, his lineage is back to Adam. And we had talked about this last week, that, his audience is really connecting to especially those people that are on the fringes, women, the poor, the sick, those kinds of things. And so, for Luke, less important really to think about, the Old Testament as such. I mean, the Old Testament's important, don't get me wrong, but to make those connections, so it really becomes more about, okay, who is this Jesus? Okay, more important that he's the the new Adam. Okay,
But
so
he wasn't a Jew,
who wasn't a Jew?
Luke. He
Yeah,
was Greek. So he was a Gentile.
yeah.
So to him, maybe, other than like going right to God, all that stuff in the middle probably didn't mean anything to his audience.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I'd say it didn't mean anything, because I think the Old Testament has, in its structure and framework, it gives us that structure and framework for why do we have why do we need a Messiah? What is the plan of God? Those kinds of things. But
But if you're talking to people who never read the Old Testament, never read the Torah,
well, they may not all of them, but some of them certainly did. And some of them would have some, knowledge. Just because you are a Gentile doesn't mean that you're 100%, outside of knowledge of the Old Testament. These people would have lived together there, so there would be some knowledge. Uh, I'm not Muslim, but I have a little bit of understanding of Islam. Because I have people that have relationships with that worship in that fashion. So yeah, I agree with you that they may not have the same knowledge of the Old Testament that Jewish persons would have had, but I believe there had to be at least some. Okay. So if we're looking at Luke then, so how does Jesus being connected to Adam sort of enhance the universality of his mission?
Because that goes back to God, and God is for everyone.
Okay. Goes back to God and God's for everyone. Okay.
Goes back to the garden.
Okay. Yeah. So in some ways, if you think about it, you think about this idea that in the beginning, okay, there wasn't, this called people. In the beginning, who was there?
Just Adam and Eve.
Adam and Eve, just humanity. And it wasn't until down the line that Adam or Abraham was called. And so from the very beginnings and going back there, it precedes, precedes the call of the Jewish person. And so, it's out of Adam and Eve that all of humanity come. And so, tracing it back there, kind of emphasizes Jesus' mission to everyone and not just to a particular group of people. Then we have John. So he has a genealogy of such, but his genealogy just connects Jesus to God. Okay. So there's no human genealogy. And so for John, he sees Jesus sort of wrapped up in this cosmic beginning. And so, he sees Jesus as this pre-existent word that's made flesh. Okay. And so, if we then look at John, how does his opening set the stage for this emphasis of Jesus as the Son of God?
because he was always there.
Okay, because he was always there. Okay, so we go from the very beginning, and then we get to my friend Mark. Okay, who at the beginning of the gospel, Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So he has no genealogy, and represents or emphasizes Jesus as, the servant, the Son of God. And so if we're looking at this, why do you think Mark, if he's focusing on Jesus as the servant, really skips this idea of a genealogy?
Oh,
Well, the servant ties back to Isaiah.
Okay. Servant ties back to Isaiah.
It doesn't really matter where you come from if you're serving.
Okay. So he's Mark's really kind of emphasizing the work rather than the who of it. So if we think about it, Mark has this idea of immediate action. Okay. We see that, it's there's not a lot of detail in Mark. You get the as ugh, sorry, as Deb said, it's bare bones. Okay. But it's always, you get this idea of movement. Okay. And if we then think about, okay, whom was Jesus or Mark writing to? Scholars kind of think that he was probably likely writing to Roman Gentiles, who, if they're Roman Gentiles, they're even more removed as Gentiles from, say, the Gentiles that would have lived in and around Jerusalem and in and around uh, Galilee. Okay, so these are further away. So, that idea of, lineage for them is certainly not important.
Wasn't Mark supposed to have ended up in Venice? And what's
That-
now Venice?
Yeah, they think. Theologically, Mark really is kind of really is kind of speaking that Jesus' identity doesn't really matter or come out of his human lineage, but who he is bound up in his commission as the Son of God and in his service. Okay. So that's the four gospels. So they're answering this question, who is Jesus? And so we begin to see that each one has a different approach. Okay, Matthew and Luke connect Jesus on a human line, John divine line, and Mark on mission. So if you think about have you ever kind of just stepped back from the gospels, because we kind of read them, but have you ever stepped back and thought about how each one creates a separate portrait of Jesus?
Kind of, and what I'm starting to think about here is when these writers made these narratives and word is still spreading by mouth, how far reaching in the first couple hundred years after the crucifixion is the story being told, and the resurrection and Jesus's life, and in what way is it being told? So how are these different perspectives being shared?
That's a good point. Because we don't even talk about that, because last week we talked about each one of these writers living in a particular community and kind of writing for that particular community. And so they write their gospel for that particular community. It's not like Amazon where they're all put. And Deb, I hear you got a book with all of the Gnostic gospels in it. So it's not like Amazon put together a book of Gnostic gospels and then you could buy it. I mean, they were kind of shared around, and it took a long while for them to circulate. And remember that, the Gospels were later. What came first? What was probably shared more than the Gospels?
The letters.
Yeah, the letters. Yeah,
Hmm.
not Mark. What's that dude's name?
Paul.
Paul, thank you. Yeah, it was Paul's letters that were circulated because they were much earlier. And then if you were and a particular community, I think would gravitate to a particular gospel rather than saying, "Oh, let me read all of these gospels." So, the folks that are Mark's community are going to focus on the letters and probably focus on Mark's. Matthew and Luke, similar kinds of things. And it's not until it's probably really not until much later that the gospels circulate and become more widely read. Probably more during the time of the early church fathers.
But people receiving this news for the first time, I mean, it just seems like it might have been completely confusing. Like, who is Jesus? Like that, if they ask that question, you're telling me what now? And like focusing on, is he, we talk about how confused we are about Trinity. Like, this must have been even a bigger headache.
Well, so some of this you gotta kind of divorce some of the theology that we have from the Gospels, because it's the theologies that we have come out of the Gospels. So they're, later when we have these four Gospels that are agreed upon as the canon. Okay, it's out of that then comes theology. So, early on, there probably was not a lot of, talk about, say the Trinity per se, or penial substitution, atonement, those kinds of things, those kind of meditations and ruminations on those theological things are kind of, sort of later additions, as early Christian fathers begin to think about these kinds of things. So if you're an early Christian, I'm talking early Christian in the 70s, 80s, 90s, those kinds of a talk about Trinity would probably be very foreign to them. So as we think about it, then, how do these different lenses that we read from shape our understanding of who Jesus is? Now, let me ask you this. So let's pretend for a minute that we didn't have one gospel. Let's maybe pick on Matthew for a minute. So Matthew never wrote his gospel. We only had Luke, John, and Mark. We didn't have that gospel. How would that impact our understanding of who Jesus is?
Then you don't have a really complete picture of Jesus as fulfilling the prophecy.
Okay.
So there's not a whole lot of referencing back to the Old Testament. Like, what is it? Now I'm the one with the memory skip that you always say, hyperlink.
Yeah.
The hyperlinks are missing.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's not my term. I got that from the Bible Project that I listened to.
Oh.
Again, hyperlinks are those connections that are embedded in Scripture that push us back. Yep. So yeah, the hyperlinks to the Old Testament would certainly not be as strong as they are. The compelling argument that Jesus as the Messiah and the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies wouldn't be there. if you could take one gospel and remove it from the canon, would it impact our understanding and our shape of who we see Jesus to be?
Mhm.
Yeah. So each one has a different contribution to make. And as a, with that contribution, we get a broader picture of Jesus. Okay. And so, we think about those kind of things. So, we talked about Matthew for a minute. And so why, for us, okay, so we understand maybe that, for a Jewish person, Matthew's emphasis and connection to prophecy fulfillment is important. But is it really important to us as 21st century Christians?
Not as much.
Not as much?
I think it is.
I think it is.
Okay.
We
So-
still want to know how he got to where he is, or who is this person really? Like, where did he come from?
And I
Okay.
think it also shows God has a plan.
Yeah.
Okay. And what so it shows that God's got a plan, but what about this plan?
Well, even when things don't make sense, like stuff in Old Testament, thousands of BC might not have made sense at all. Whatever prophets were saying or what was going on was leading somewhere. And so that when things in our lives don't make sense at all, we can still trust that God has a plan and knows what's going on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we spent more than a year, I think it's more than a year, in the Torah. What did you learn about God's plan as we studied the Torah?
People are always the ones that screw up.
Okay. All right.
God is faithful. We are faulty.
Okay. Uh-huh. What
Takes
did
time.
Go ahead, Herman, I'm sorry.
Takes time.
It takes time. Okay. So what is the purpose of, or what was the purpose of the temple?
Connection between God and people.
Okay.
The
Connection.
place where we meet.
Uh-huh. And so if we understand the idea and the purpose of the temple or the tabernacle, does that inform and edify our understanding of Jesus coming to earth?
Yes.
Understanding the sacrifices, the requirement of sacrifices that are laid out in the Old Testament, does that help us to understand better the death of Jesus?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So in some ways, I think that's the importance of the Old Testament is, it can you understand Jesus without the Old Testament? Probably, but not as deeply
Yeah.
as you would if you're a student of the Old Testament. Now, Luke, universality, universal genealogy, reminds us that, Jesus is the Savior for all people. How many times do we kind of want to take, Jesus for our own, and he's one of us, and he's not for that person out there. And so, Luke helps to remind us that, Jesus didn't just come for Jewish people. Jesus didn't just come for Christian people. Jesus came for all people. And so then we get to John and his theological opening. How does that help us to appreciate the divinity of Christ?
Because in the beginning was the Word, and He was the Word.
Okay, so
God.
huh?
He was God.
Okay. So, when John says in the beginning was the Word and the Word was God and the Word was with God. So, it's in the beginning.
And that's taking it back to creation.
Right, hyperlink back to creation.
Mm.
And so, what is the divinity of Christ? Okay, it's hyperlinked back to this God of creation. Okay, and so, what happened at creation? Why was creation? So you have all of that stuff that's in and around creation that is then connected to Jesus.
Mm.
Okay. And then we have Mark and his omission and encourage us, at times, we want to get, tripped up in the weeds there. But Mark reminds us, hey, Jesus did come for a specific ministry and purpose and has us focus on those. So as you kind of have listened, as you've kind of thought about the gospels and stuff, which one at this stage of your faith journey resonates best with you?
Mhm.
I'm kind of more of a John
You're more of a John, okay? Why does it resonate more with you?
because the genealogy, I mean, I understand how it ties prophecy together and everything, but to me, it's just pretty plain and simple. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And
Okay.
then a couple of verses down, the Word came down and walked among us and became flesh. It's like, hello, it's there. You don't really need to go through the whole ancestry.com version.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Sue on that. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Luke, I connect with the Luke one, where, Jesus is for everybody kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a simple person. I connect with Mark.
Of course you do.
Why would that happen?
It's got nothing to do with the name, huh?
No, no.
However, at the same time, I think the genealogy part of it is also interesting, because that shows in a way that Jesus just didn't happen; that there was a progression, and I think that's interesting too. But I personally don't need to know all that stuff, but not all of it anyway. Maybe some of it be interesting. But
Mhm.
I mean, we've always heard, Jesus was the son of David, so that much. But yeah, I think maybe a little bit of everything. The genealogy and the God. God is God, and it probably they had something to say to everybody, really. I guess. Or
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else?
The genealogy doesn't mean that much to me is because
Mm.
it's really not, it's not relevant.
No.
Jesus had no relation whatsoever to Joseph, physically, genetically. So he really wasn't from the house and lineage of David.
Yes, I've
Always there.
That's an interesting point.
Well, as you got to remember that, it's when you're thinking about this though, sometimes you got to detangle yourself from, the literal there and kind of come back and think, more from a theological standpoint. Like technically, okay, he was not, from the seed of Joseph, but by putting him there and locating him there, and not so much even locating there, but connecting him, to Adam or to Abraham, what does that have to say, theologically? Any other folks that want to share? For me, I connect more with Matthew, not so much for the genealogy, but as you probably can tell, I like the Bible in general, but I love the Old Testament in particular.
Mm.
And so, I like the way that, Matthew kind of forces us to go back and make those connections to the Old Testament. But all of them are important for all of us to read so that we get the best rounded picture of Jesus we can, because each gospel introduces Jesus in a different way, and it has a unique purpose that we need to think about. And so we get a more rounded picture. It's kind of when you, if you saw it, if you were a police officer and you were called to investigate a car accident, what's the best way to get an understanding of what happened?
Talking to witnesses,
How many?
A zillion.
as many as you
Okay.
can find,
As many as you can find, because each one has a
different
Different take.
perspective. Yeah.
because if we relied on one, we'd get a singular perspective. And so that's the importance here as we begin to, because remember, our whole goal here is to kind of look at the Gospels and kind of compare them and say, okay, why is some stuff here? Why is some stuff not there? Why is it a little bit different here than there? Because remember, each one has a unique purpose.
Mhm.
And it's when we take them all together that we begin to see, a richer and deeper picture of Jesus. All right, so that is all that I have for tonight.